Again, meeting in progress. We are now live. Presenter laptop, sound check, presenter laptop. Sound check, clerk's laptop, sound check. Sound check 2, clerk's laptop, sound check 2, clerk's laptop. Sound check 2, presenter laptop, sound check 2, presenter laptop.
Tell me when it's live.
We are live, Mr.
We
Mayor.
are live. Okay, good to know. Thank you. And welcome everyone to our council meeting this April the 14th. Good morning. And we are on traditional territory of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. The land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. And today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website, and as well a reminder that all electronic devices are to be on a non-audible function during our council meeting. And of course, we all remember the 5-minute rule in terms of speaking, and we request that you adhere to that. And I will now go to the roll call and call on for attendance, Councillor Wilson.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Councillor Farr.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, sir. Councillor Nand. I see you. We'll make
Good
that
morning,
as present.
Mayor. Can you hear
Good
me now?
morning.
Present?
I can,
Thank you.
yep, thank you. Councillor Marula.
Good morning, Mr.
Good
Mayor.
morning. Councillor Collins. Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
A soft-spoken president, Mr. Mayor.
Ward 6 is present. Councillor Pauls.
I'm here. Thank
Good
you.
morning.
Good morning.
Councillor Danko.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Partridge.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Councillor. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm present.
Good morning. Councillor Ferguson.
He's
He was here.
He was
He is there, Mr. Mayor. I don't think his sound is working.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Johnson. But not yet. And Councillor Pearson.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. And Councillor Clark.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. We'll come back to Councillor Ferguson when he's available. Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, good morning. There are 14 added communication items. We have 14 pieces of correspondence respecting the designation of the former St. Giles Church, with a recommendation to be received and referred to the consideration of item 2C of the Planning Committee Report 21-005. And there is one added notice of motion, 7.1, enforcement offenses and regulations under the Conservations Act and the Trespass to Property Act at the Hamilton Waterfall areas under the jurisdiction of Hamilton Conservation.
Okay, thank you.
everything.
Could I have a motion then to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Pearson, seconded by Councillor Partridge? Thank you. Any comments or questions on the agenda or amendments? If not, we'll go to a vote. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, we're good.
And that carries 12-0.
Thank you. And declarations of interest, members of council. Not seeing any indications at this point. If it does happen to come up, you can certainly acknowledge at that moment in time if something jogs your memory. I will turn to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, City Council of March the 31st. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Wilson. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing none, thank you. We'll go to a vote. All in favor? Vote is up. Any opposed? Councillor Ferguson, just to be clear, we did call for roll call and you were occupied at the time. You are present, correct?
Let me check. Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
All present and accounted for. Just to get it on the record. All right, on the Madam Clerk, the vote on that one.
Yeah, we're just waiting for the vote to come in. I believe Councillor Collins is here, but we're not getting his vote in.
I'm here. I'm just trying to get onto eScribe. Thank you.
Okay, and will you be voting in favor
Yes,
to
thank you.
receive the minutes? Okay.
Thank you.
And Councillor Clark, we're waiting for your vote as well. I no
Councillor
longer
Clark,
see
I don't
him, so
see
we'll
on
put
the
him as
screen at the moment.
absent.
Yeah. Okay,
So that carries 13-0.
thank you. We'll turn to the communications items. Councillor Pauls, can I have a motion from you, please, on the communications items to put them on the
Yes.
floor?
Yes, thank you. That the April 14, 2021 council communication be approved as presented.
Thank you. And the seconder for that would be Councillor Jackson. Good choice. All right, thank you. On the communications items, are there any items in communications you would like to speak to, address, amend, or otherwise? I'm not seeing any indications. Madam Clerk, anything in the chat? No. All right, thank you. We'll go to a vote then on the communications. All in favor or opposed? And Chad, you're able to vote, or do you want to just give us your
I did. It
verbal?
looks like eScribe's working for me for now. It looks like
Okay,
it.
good.
And Mr. Mayor, that carries 13-0.
Thank you. Councillor Pauls, a motion to move into committee of the whole for the reading of the reports, please.
Yes, that the council move into committee of the whole to consider to the committee reports.
Thank you. And again, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favor of that, please indicate. Votes are coming up fast and furious. If we keep up this pace, we'll be done before lunch. I've jinxed it now, haven't I?
That carries, Mr. Mayor, 13-0.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to turn to Councillor Danko. Planning Committee report, April the 6th. A motion to put that on the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the Planning Committee report 21-005, being the meeting held on Tuesday, April 6, 2021, be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Okay, thank
Moved
you.
by myself, seconded by Vice Chair Councillor Johnson.
Perfect, thank you. I know, Councillor Nan, you have an amended item that you'd like to bring forward, so you could do that now.
I'm sorry,
And then
Mr. Mayor, if we could have a different seconder, as Councillor Johnson is not in the meeting right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Second Vice Chair Councillor Farr.
Thank you. So, Councillor Nan, you have an amended motion on the heritage application. Go
I
ahead.
do, Mayor, through you, if I could read out the amending motion, and then I do have some comments. So if it's your prerogative, I could start my speaking notes afterwards.
Yep.
So the amending motion before council today is that item 2C, that the recommendations of item 2C of the Planning Committee Report 21-005 respecting Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Report 21-002, former St. Giles Church located at 679 Main Street East and 85 Holton Avenue South, Hamilton, be deleted in its entirety, and that the following be inserted therein. That the former St. Giles Church located at 679 Main Street East and 85 Holton Avenue South, Hamilton, added item 11.1, that staff be directed to take appropriate action to designate 679 and 85 Holton under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, including preparation and giving the required public notice of the notice of intent to designate and statement of cultural heritage value or interest and description of heritage attributes, that A, the designation of the former St. Giles Church located at 679 Main Street East and 85 Holton Avenue South, Hamilton, be referred back to the Planning Committee to allow the ward councillor time to meet with the applicant and the community with respect to the proposed future development of the site, and B, that the owner of 85 Holton Avenue be invited to attend a future Planning Committee meeting to present their proposed approach and concept for development at 85 Holton Avenue prior to making a formal application for planning approval. It's moved by myself and seconded by you, Mayor. And if I could, I have a few comments and statements to share on the motion.
Now's the right time.
Thank you so much. Colleagues and neighbors, Ward 3 and indeed all of Hamilton is a dynamic place full of passionate advocates. And on some rare occasions, those passions will seem to conflict. In the case of the former St. Giles Church at 85 Holton Avenue South, we have passionate, long-time members of the congregation who want to transform the land into much-needed mixed income and affordable housing. And we also have passionate defenders of our built heritage who want the existing church structure to remain intact for its cultural and architectural significance. On the surface, these two positions seem to be at odds. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of doubt cast on the future of this property and what is possible here, and a lot of misinformation, and which has turned into blame, accusations, assumptions, and harm. As a ward councillor, I'd like to see us all steer the conversation away from what divides us and instead work towards what unites us, towards hope. And I believe there's a solution possible that can unite our community, but it's going to take trust and patience for us to get there. Over the past 6 business days since the last planning committee meeting, I've met with many players on the matter of 85 Holton Avenue South and received many correspondences from residents, heritage advocates, past members of the congregation and current members of New Vision Church. I've heard from the United Church of Canada and has also heard from one organization who seeks to make an offer to purchase the property. This Monday, I met with the Friends of St. Giles who shared their position statement with me, and in it, they expressed a clear desire to work in collaboration with New Vision Church and UPRC, so long as the development pursues an adaptive reuse of the existing structure. They have fundraising ideas and creative solutions they simply want to have heard. They also have shared their frustration in getting more information about the developer's plans and expressed that they are very eager to hear them. And on Friday, I spoke with representatives from New Vision Church. They told me that their property, the former St. Giles Church, is an integral part of sustaining their current location and faith-based work at Main and McNabb. The work and community space that they maintain downtown relies on the self-sustaining financial plan to build mixed income housing on the Holton site. I know I don't need to remind any of us that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Not only have people lost jobs and incomes, at the same time, property values are skyrocketing and rents are following suit. We know we have an affordable housing crisis in this city. And as a council, we simply cannot afford to ignore any proposal to bring more affordable housing to our city. Not only must we enable our existing affordable housing partners, we must also encourage, nurture, and support new partners who come along. New Vision United Church aims to be one of those partners and has been growing their capacity over the years. This past Monday, I also spoke to representatives of the United Property Resource Corporation, and they expressed very clearly to me, and also through written correspondences we've just received as council, that they are requesting more time to deliver their very detailed design scenarios in regards to the development of the site. These scenarios will include 3 options based on the input we received, or they received, sorry, at the public meeting on February 11th. 2 of these options include elements of preserving or reusing portions of the existing structure. And on the issue of heritage designation, there is no longer a looming threat of demolition. UPRC has pulled their demolition application during the planning meeting in an effort to show us all that they are committed to working through not only misinformation, but working towards collaboration. They've given me their word that they will not pursue any other demolition application until such time that they have an opportunity to meet with the community, share their 3 scenarios, and engage in the necessary dialogue about all potential outcomes. Should New Vision United Church or UPRC apply for a demolition permit before such time, I am serving public notice today that I will be the one who moves the motion to have the site designated, which brings us here today. I'm seeking my council colleagues' support to refer the matter back to Planning Committee in order to afford me the time as the area councillor to meet with the community and the developer and work on the many points of potential collaboration, of which in fact there are many. There is a win-win solution that's possible here. Relationships are damaged. We owe it to each other and our community to do the good work that will bring collaboration, allow us to hear each other, and to heal. Colleagues, the motion is before you, moved by myself and seconded by the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well laid out and explained, and happy to second that for you. Speakers list is now Councillor Farr, and then after that, Councillor Clark. Councillor Farr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you just fine.
To the mover, thank you, Narinder. I know this has been a lot of work for you, and certainly we welcomed your attendance at Planning Committee for, I think it was 2 or 3 hours there. And you got a real good taste of, how we sometimes must operate on the fly. I think what Councillor Partridge did, following, all the delegations and then learning of a demo application was prudent. I was glad to second that, in that, it really definitively put us in a position where we could, get to this point. So I appreciate that you've done a lot of work leading up to, and then since, and have come forward with us. Just on through you, Chair, your win-win comment just now. You and I have had this chat. I completely appreciate and understand, and I'm with you on not wanting to insert yourself in private conversations between two parties about a real estate matter, and you made that clear to me. But I'm still kind of hung up on that, as you know. And instead of win-win, I'm interested in finding out from you with this motion today that says I'm going to go back, I'm going to talk to a whole lot of people. What about a win-win-win, in that we all know there is, and you've just referenced it, another party interested in just purchasing this property, also doing affordable, and now I'm hearing deeply affordable, to a percentage that's pretty unique, pretty good. And in turn, the sale of the property could be a solution for the St. Giles folks to go and find some other land and achieve their goal of creating this income project to make New Vision operational for forever. So on that, can you at least endeavor, when this does eventually come back to Planning Committee, to kind of give us as a Planning Committee a sense that at the very least that conversation between the two parties has happened, or if it hasn't happened, why?
Sorry, are you anticipating an answer right now?
Yeah, I'm just asking the mover if she'll at least endeavor to bring those two parties together. And if one or two of them don't want, I know one does want to get together, but they can't get together at this point, Mr. Mayor. Can you at least bring those two parties together, and can we at least get, an answer as to why a win-win-win scenario can't occur? Because you would essentially, with the win-win-win, more than double what's being presented here from St. Giles as the only party right now in terms of the affordability.
Okay, Councillor Nat.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, I think a comment and then an answer. I think that the challenge here as elected representatives of a public corporation is something that I've expressed very clearly to yourself and to the proponent who's emailed me, that I am not interested in entering into the realm of facilitating private transaction between private properties on real estate transactions. That's not appropriate from my perspective in terms of a councillor's role. What I've heard clearly, and what this council has heard previously, is that a congregation has come before this council, and I think asking them to offload it to a private market or another housing service provider is not appropriate for me to do. But I have spoken to UPRC and New Vision. I've informed them that I have received emails. I've asked them whether or not they're open to being in conversations in the community, and we just received a correspondence formally on this agenda from UPRC. In it, it states very clearly that they are open to speaking to any individual or organization who has strategic or fundraising ideas they would like to consider or like to have the organization consider. They remain open to that. And yeah, so I would say that the ball is in both of those courts, and I believe the door is open for that conversation.
I'll be looking forward to hearing how that conversation plays out when your motion talks about them coming to delegate at the appropriate time to Planning Committee. So I'll ask that question then. That's great to hear. Thank you. I think I'm supportive, quite obviously. I hope we all are. Nothing better than to bring all the parties together and figure something out. The concern I still have, but it sounds like with the options that the mover has mentioned, that an adaptive reuse option is now very much in play. It hasn't been necessarily discussed until this point. I re-listened to the UPRC delegation. It was never brought up, adaptive reuse. Well, I've got a series of quotes, but I won't share the things that were said, but none specific to adaptively reusing the church. There was talk about, selling off pieces, and some that have already been sold off, and others that are being preserved and maybe donated from the inside. So I would just suggest that you're doing it anyway, but it's not in the motion, that we would probably want to add it to the registry anyway, which gives you 60 days. It's not a designation. As part of the motion. And I know, I appreciate that you said if they apply for another demo permit, you'll be the first in line to designate it, but this gives you 60 days in the event that happens. I don't believe it will, but it's probably best to cover it in the policy we're creating here. And so I would suggest we put it on the registry to give you 60 days to solve the heritage issue if there is one, as opposed to 20 days. And believe me, in the past, we've seen that it's very possible that if you apply at a certain time, there may not be a ratification availability within the 20 days. So it's just to be safe to avoid a surprise again on a demo application coming forward. So that's all. Other than that, again, I appreciate where this is coming from. I'm more than willing and happy as a planning committee member to wait patiently for a report back that hopefully addresses a whole bunch of things, including what I mentioned off the top. Those conversations that may actually turn into a win-win-win in terms of more than doubling the affordability we're talking about on this file. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the mover.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you just fine, thank you.
I've been having lots of issues with my VPN this morning, so I've turned it off.
I see you coming and going, so.
I'm dancing all over the place here.
I see you completely all here, and your voice is loud and clear.
I'm so glad. I just wanted to make some really brief comments. I've been watching this from afar. I was not at the planning committee, and I saw it as a typical situation where the city council is facing strong competing interests, and we have to somehow find the pragmatic, collaborative solution to the problem. There's no, in my mind, sir, there's no doubt that there's going to be other churches that are going to be facing similar situations as their congregation numbers dwindle. I think having the ward councillor, for all intents and purposes, mediate, trying to get the parties together to come up with a solution that everyone can work with, is admirable, and I would encourage that we enable that to happen. If it doesn't happen, then of course we can use stronger resources and bylaws to help us. But I just want to acknowledge the efforts of Councillor Nan in bringing the parties together and hopefully coming up with a collaborative solution where everybody's happy in the end, which is always challenging getting there. But I think the pressures of the designation sitting there is helping to bring people to the table to make sure that we are preserving some heritage, but ensuring that we are moving forward with affordable housing, which we desperately need in this community. So I'm pleased where we are and what this amendment does. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Marula?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm supporting the motion. I'm just curious, however, with respect to the demolition option, is that still going to be presented as an option moving forward with this motion? Through you to Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Councillor Nan?
Through you, thank you, Councillor Miller, for the question. There's 3 scenarios that the developer is working on. I don't have any further insight on what those development scenarios look like. They've been frantically working since February 11th, since our first and only community consultation on this event or on this development. They received the input of the desire in the local community for playground space, parking to be well accounted for, green space, the potential for community gardens in this space, that the development respect the existing neighborhood, and that there be a serious consideration of heritage and reuse and preservation of the structure. So those are their marching orders, Councillor Marula. So I assume that those three are going to be integrated in, and I've gotten clarity from them that two of the options at least integrate the heritage components as well.
Okay, so I just want to serve notice that I will not support demolition in any shape or form. So if they come back with that option, I can't support it. I know that Delta High School, I actually designated Delta in advance, 10 years in advance, in anticipation of something like this happening and not being in control. It's very important. There's no other building like that around. So adaptive reuse is the only option. Anything that even remotely considers demolishing anything with heritage value, I can't support. And I'd be very disillusioned if anyone supported it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I appreciate the comments of Councillor Farr and wanting to add in the A from the original motion from the Heritage Committee, which was to put the church on the registry. It doesn't designate it, but at least protects it, because right now St. Giles is very vulnerable. And we want to protect it from any kind of demolition, which I certainly would not support. And when we talk about adaptive reuse, that to me is the only option. And I just want to point out that I'd completely forgotten, but there is a church in Waterdown where that has actually been done by a developer who developed the land around the church into townhouses, but the church itself, they turned into affordable apartment units. And they've won awards for it. It's absolutely a beautiful example of what can be done. It's a much smaller version, of course, than St. Giles Church, but the point is, it does work and it can be done. So I believe that Councillor Danko may have an amendment coming forward. I don't speak for him, but I would like to see that we put the St. Giles onto the registry, as Councillor Marula said, to protect it for the 60 days, because you know, if a demolition permit comes forward, anything can happen with this building. Anything can happen at all. And it doesn't have to be within the next month, but we could be caught again in a timing scenario where we do not have enough time to get it on the registry, or in fact to go straight to designation. And so I support where Councillor Nan is coming from. And she has worked incredibly hard on this, and I give her kudos for that. But this church right now, it has to be protected, and putting it on the registry, that gives you your 60 days, but it also prevents the demolition from happening until that decision can be made. And as Councillor Marula said, you know, doing a designation, it could be 10 years down the road before that building, or any building that's designated, gets developed. But it is incumbent on us to protect the heritage of our city. And so that would be what I would like to see. And I'll wait to hear from others. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further speakers indicated at this point. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers? I see Councillor Danko's hand up, so go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I guess I'll put that on the table then, an amending motion to add a part C to the motion to refer this back to Planning Committee, and it would be moved by myself. I don't know who would like second by Councillor Partridge. That the property this is item A from the Heritage Committee recommendation. that's in the package, but it says that the property known as the former St. Giles Church, located at 679 Main Street East and 85 Holton Street South, Hamilton, be added to the Municipal Heritage Register as a property of cultural heritage significance. And just really briefly, what that does is it doesn't change any of the aims and goals for St. Giles. All it does is it adds it to the register formally so that we have a 60-day period where we can step in and take action if a demolition permit is enacted. And it gives us legal protection then, notwithstanding that we do have the assurance from the development group and from the ward councillor, which is fantastic. But this gives us a legal protection that as a council, if a demolition permit comes in, that we can act immediately with an emergency designation if necessary. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Farr a second time, and I believe Councillor Nan a second time. Councillor Farr.
No, that's fine. I'll support that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nan on the amendment then.
Thank you. On the amendment that's before us to the amendment that I've moved and you've seconded. So what I'll say to my colleagues about that is that I appreciate that some councillors want to put in the legal mechanisms now to, should anything happen, protect the potential or enable the 60-day period for comment and stopping the demolition if an application were to come forward. The challenge I have is that so much doubt has been cast forward, and the developer has come on board as of November when they reached out to me. In December, I met with them and I asked them to have a first community consultation meeting. We had our first community consultation meeting in February. By March, we've been thrown into a process here where their demolition permit expired. They scrambled to move things along, and since then have removed their demolition permit. And by the city actually putting it on the registry, I'm just very cautious of the doubt that we as a municipality are even putting forward, when right now what is truly needed is an opportunity for the developer to do their good work and bring back what they said. They said to the community on February 11th, and again in multiple other iterations, that they are working on scenarios. Just give us a moment to do that. They have no intention of going any further with a demolition permit. And I would say, as the area councillor, I've requested it very clearly to all of my colleagues today that should they try a malicious move, that enable me to be the person that moves that motion. That's my humble request to all of you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a motion on the floor. Councillor Partridge.
Yeah, just very quickly, putting it on the registry certainly does not prevent the councillor from moving a motion to designate it. Putting it on the registry protects it so that that can actually take place. So I just want to make sure everybody's really clear on that. And at least that would give her the opportunity to do that. So I support the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark. Oh, I have Councillor Jackson for a first time. Apologies. Councillor Jackson, go ahead.
This is an amendment. It's my first time too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
That's
you're
fine.
right. Correct. Councillor Clark.
Not to be.
No,
So
you're
sorry.
100% correct. I was wrong. You were right.
So I have a bit of concern about the amendment. My understanding is that the area councillor has had good faith discussions with the developer and the property owner. I understand that they are fully informed as to the authority of the municipality to put it on the registry or to designate it to prevent demolition. I understand that even if they sprung a malicious move and filed a demolition application, the mayor has the authority to call a special council meeting so that we can actually designate the property. So I'm a little bit concerned what message we're sending when the area councillor has exercised due diligence and has worked in good faith with the area developer and the property owner to find a collaborative resolution to the issue and report back to planning. I don't see how it could not be seen by the property owner that we basically stripped that authority of the ward councillor and we're just going to put it on the registry to prevent any of these things from happening. If they've agreed that they're not going to do that and they're working on a collaborative solution, I would assume that if it was me as a ward councillor, that I would want my council colleagues' support on it, give me the opportunity to show that it can be done. And failing that, then the mayor could order a special council meeting and we could deal with it accordingly. So I don't see the downside in allowing Councillor Nan to continue her discussions to come up with a solution. And I think that's what we would ask for ourselves in that situation. So I think the amendment that is being proposed right now is premature. I think we still have all of the control. We can still exercise that control if the developer blindsides Councillor Nan and this community and does not operate in good faith. But let's not be the ones that start that ball rolling by not operating in good faith. Those are my comments, sir, and I hope they're taken with the intention that they're given. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
On the amendment now. We're on the amendment at this moment. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And in a similar vein, but different words to Councillor Clark's opinion expressed, I find this now somewhat unfortunate. I got two members of council, new members of council that I respect very much, chair of the planning committee, introducing the amendment, and the ward councillor who spoke eloquently to begin with, saying it's in my hands, working with all stakeholders. And when I heard a progressive member of council, like Councillor Nance, suggest that, look, I'm paraphrasing, that she's willing to take a leap of faith with the developer, that the developer's word will be they will not apply for demolition. Otherwise, she'll be the first one to bring back a heritage designation motion. I thought we were hopefully all on side to move ahead with the referral back and let more conversation occur. And yet I do appreciate the passionate heritage advocates of Councillor Marula, Partridge, and Chair Danko wanting to, if you will, empower and embolden the Ward 3 councillor by getting it on the record now with the heritage designation over 60 days. Mr. Mayor, I just find it very unfortunate that even within council now, we seem to have a competing interest, and I was hoping we could avoid that in referring all of this back for another time. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, how did we get into this position? Because I think there's been a lack of trust that led to us being in the surprised situation at planning, where now we have to chase the issue rather than proactively. This all should have been done months ago. The community should have been called in. There was an intent. I've dealt with a lot of applications in my area. And the way it's done is that first you find out about it, then you announce it, then you have the necessary meetings in order to elaborate on it. But at this point, what I've gathered, all the evidence before me is it came to committee, blindsiding committee. So can somebody, through you, Mr. Mayor, if they're going to ask us to trust them, why didn't they approach us at the beginning of the process so that we could have done all of this committee work at committee, even better at a neighborhood level? So through you to planning staff, how did this happen? Why was planning committee blindsided by this application? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and we are speaking to the amendment, to be fair, Councillor. So
it's context. It's context.
I know, I get you, but I just want to make sure that we're all not veering off into kind of the issue as a whole, which I appreciate. To the staff, who is here that can answer that question?
So Through Mr. Mayor, it's Jason Thorne, General Manager of Planning and Economic Development.
Thank you.
So it's kind of necessary to go back really to when this was first in front of committee in 2018. That's when committee and council first considered the heritage designation and opted not to pursue it at that time. And that's when St. Giles and New Vision had kind of elaborated their broader vision for the two properties. It was back in front of Heritage Committee, not with the new staff report. The staff report on the table is still from 2018, which is the recommendation for heritage designation. I think what happened between Heritage Committee and Planning Committee, the applicant did previously have a demolition permit in hand for the demolition of the property, but it did lapse. So if a demolition permit is inactive for a period of time, it does lapse. It would appear that the applicant was actually not aware that it had lapsed until it was in the media and discussed at Heritage Committee that it had lapsed. And so that's when, in finding that out, they basically resubmitted for a new demolition permit, and that occurred on the day that that Planning Committee was meeting.
Thank you. Councilor Marula.
Okay, so clearly they're in a position where they've erred gravely, but they had the demolition in hand. They could have demolished it. Would have been a sad day if that happened. Thank God it didn't. And now we're in a position to preserve the building. As I said, I can't support the demolition of it. So if the option of demolition is on the table, how do we move forward? Are we suggesting that we now open up that can of worms now? Or do we simply ask for a very reasoned approach, as Councillor Danko brought forward? If they're not up to anything, why are they afraid of simply adding it? It almost makes me even more suspicious that they don't even want it included in the wording. Like, why? That really does beg the question, which now I'm actually questioning whether I'm going to support this at all with the demolition on the table. When I suggested I would support this, I did so based on the understanding that they were walking away from the demolition. I'm not hearing that. And I can't trust somebody that's already tried to burn us. So at the end of the day, if demolition is on the table, I cannot support this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've now a growing speakers list, so Councillor Farr, Ferguson, Vanderbeek, and then Nan for a second time. Hopefully on the amendment, folks. Councillor Farr.
Only on the amendment, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as is what's before us, look, I'm a little concerned that folks are worried about taking what exists right now as a demo permit being applied for, and in a 20-day period, a building department that's obligated under the act to issue that demolition permit, versus putting a building on a registry, which no one on either side of this issue could argue that at the very least it deserves to be on the registry of buildings of cultural and heritage interest. No one can argue that. It meets all the tests, almost all the tests, I think. So a question through you to staff. This amendment before us to Jay or Steve or whomever, or if we have Alyssa with us, you put the building on the registry of the buildings of heritage and cultural interest, you get the 60-day protection versus what is now 20 days. And again, nobody can argue that eligibility. That doesn't affect the ward councillors' efforts to bring everyone together and discuss and come up with hopefully the adaptive reuse option, which I suspect would be one of the options. So through you to staff, that doesn't change the way from here onward the ward councillor can get out there and bring everybody together.
Okay, Jason.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, the council is correct. Being on the registry does not mean that you are in a situation where you need to require heritage permits for alterations to the building. That only kicks in at designation. The primary implication of being on the registry is, as was noted, it provides for a 60-day notice period prior to issuance of a demolition permit. One other implication of being on the heritage registry is if the application does proceed to a rezoning or a planning application, there are additional requirements in our official plan for buildings that are on the heritage registry, such as doing a heritage impact assessment. That kind of thing may be required if they advance to a planning application.
Well, in their delegation, they already said they have a heritage architect, so I'm sure that's not a big challenge. Just to focus on the amendment, Mr. Mayor, all this, what I see this as is there are obviously numbers of people on both sides of this issue. There's a petition close to 1,000 people that would rather us not even have this conversation and stick to the original planning motion by Councillor Partridge on just designating this property. This is a compromise to that, as opposed to going exactly the opposite direction from just a few days ago at Planning Committee. A registry hopefully puts some of those folks at ease that we are doing our due diligence, which we are able to do based on our own policies and bylaws, and create this buffer and hopefully a sense of relief to some of the folks that unfortunately they're out there that are worried that, you know, a demolition could be imminent or could be applied for and could happen in a time frame where council doesn't have the opportunity to ratify, notwithstanding the point about the mayor can call an emergency meeting, but we, you know, you could miss that too. This is just a protection, a buffer that hopefully alleviates some of the concerns, not all, for the folks that are interested in nothing other than a heritage designation. So I'm supportive of it. I don't think we should be in fear of it. It's perfectly acceptable amendment, and I'm hopeful that we get the votes for it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I fully support referring this back to planning to allow the ward councillor to try to do her magic. I was very impressed with her thoughts and how the process is going to be unfolding, and a win-win solution is in there. I don't see how protecting it for 60 days makes a difference. Renner could still go ahead and do her negotiations, but it does protect us. I tell you, at planning meeting, and this was a consent item, something that's just for information, I felt being caught flat-footed. I had no idea this was coming. And when the chief building official advised us that a half hour before the meeting, a demolition permit had been applied for, it sure looked to me like they were trying to get ahead of getting it on the 60-day registry. Because once the building or the demolition permit was in, it made that motion coming from Heritage Committee null and void. You couldn't even move forward with it because the demolition permit was already in. So I don't see any problem with protecting it for 60 days. I doubt that the ward councillor will be able to get this resolved in 60 days. It takes a lot of work to try to pull all these parties together and get a consensus. But when an application for demolition comes in a half hour before the meeting starts, you know, sends a signal to me that, gee, is there another decision maker in there that may be working behind the scenes? So I think we have a duty to protect the site for the 60 days, so I'll support the amendment. But I will be wholeheartedly supporting referring it back to the ward councillor to do her magic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Der Beek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The challenge for me here is, so first of all, I agree with what Councillor Clark said. The challenge for me is that the ward councillor has a plan. And she has asked, basically, she's asked us to trust her and to trust her judgment. And none of us have done the work on this project that she has. And none of us are really aware of the players that are in the game, loosely using the word game, of course. And she's also asked that if it's to be on the registry or designated, that we let her do it. And I think every single one of us knows how important it is when we have an extremely controversial situation in our ward, that we be able to resolve it if possible. And we do have additional mechanisms in case there's something devious happening. I hate to even use that word. Behind the scenes, this council has the ability to move forward quickly and do something to protect this very important heritage building in our city. But I want to say that I'm going to listen to what Councillor Nan has to say because she's speaking soon. But I would rather see a motion like this come from the ward councillor than we make a decision to vote somewhat out of fear that something untoward is going to happen. I have a lot of respect for the ward councillor. I have a lot of respect for every one of you as ward councillors. And I don't think that there's anybody around this table who knows their ward better than the ward councillor. And if she's asking us to trust her and to trust her instincts about who is involved in this and what it is that they're trying to work toward, I really want to respect that. And I really want to show her that I support her. I am well prepared to support the motion to go back to planning, where it will get discussed again. But at this point, I'm not prepared to support this amendment. I'm going to listen to what Councillor Nan has to say and to what Councillor Pearson has to say after me. But I am really finding that challenging. So thank you for the time to express my thinking.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to certainly all the previous speakers. Yeah, this has been, I'm sure a very difficult time and process for Councillor Nan, and I truly respect all of the work that she has done. And I think we all know, as Councillor Vanderbeek's mentioned, we all work hard in our wards, and we know our wards more than anyone. We all will have issues come forward at a day where, the challenge is supporting a ward councillor knowing they've done the work. And I believe Councillor Nan has done the work. This hasn't been just slid in on us or come to us at the last minute, because this was dealt with, as Jason Thorne mentioned earlier, this was dealt with in 2018. And there was more to context to the issues with the two properties that the United Church of Canada owned, and that was the one across the street, the New Visions, and St. Giles. So I don't want to belabor the length of conversation on this, but I am going to follow the lead of Councillor Nan. You have to put the trust in the ward councillor. We all deal with issues every day. I deal with a number of issues with residents, not just residents, but developers and everyone. And if you want to keep or maintain that support and confidence that you're working with them, don't blindside them. And I think that's what we would be doing if we take away from Councillor Nan's initiative at this point. I trust her in going forward. I trust the proponents for doing the right thing. They know what's going on out there. They know exactly what the concerns are, and I'm sure they're prepared to come forward at an appropriate time with all the information coming back to Planning Committee, and hopefully doing the right thing. But we have to respect this, and I also, above everything else, respect Councillor Nan's comments at Planning Committee that she attended, that her ward has pretty well suffered a tremendous amount of loss of affordable housing, and this is her initiative, and I don't blame her for that, because we know what her goals have been since being elected, and I can't take away from that either. So I'm going to listen to Councillor Nan as well, and I am supportive of her motion. It's going back to Planning Committee. We have the tools to stop anything in its tracks should something happen. But I appreciate all the work that she's done, and I'm confident she will continue to do the right thing. And you know what, Mr. Mayor, it's also very difficult for me because I am a Heritage Committee member, and I've been on Heritage Committee since the 90s. So I truly respect the concerns of preservation and the need. So it's often a difficult balancing act, and this is one Councillor Nan has in her lap right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments will be short. I will be supporting the motion as it was originally written and submitted to this council. I appreciate that there have been parties active on this for some time, and we need to provide consistency when we're doing community work. I believe, as was stated in Councillor Nan's opening remarks, she is very, as we all know, very engaged in the community, very active. She's all about capacity building, and she has shown us that commitment since she arrived. And I am in awe of it many, many times. So she has asked us to give her that time to engage in those conversations further. She will be doing that collaboratively with the parties and with the community. And I think we have to give her that time and leverage to do that. So I will be supporting the motion as it is written and as it was submitted to this council. Thank you.
Thank you. So not supporting the amendment is what I heard.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask Councillor Nan to speak. I do have some thoughts, but I'm gonna wait till Councillor Nan has made her points. So Councillor Nan, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have a couple of questions through you to staff on the demolition permit. And so as you can imagine, the difficulty in this scenario is that, as I outlined to my colleagues today and at Planning Committee, I found out about the developer having carriage of the site in late November, early December, worked with them quickly to get a meeting going on during lockdown and virtually set up for February. And then on March 29th, it's my understanding that the developer learned through a spec article that their demolition permit had been expired by the municipality due to inactivity. Through you to staff, where did the notice of the expiration of the demolition permit go? Where was it delivered to and at what date?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So I don't have the precise dates in front of me, but I think it is important to note that yes, my understanding is the applicant was not aware that it had lapsed. The notice, our practice is the notice goes to the property owner, which in this case would be the St. Giles Church. So that's where the notice would have been sent. And so that the applicant was not aware that their previous demolition permit had lapsed until the media stories around the date of that Heritage Committee a couple days before Planning Committee. So they weren't aware that it had lapsed.
And through you, Mayor, to General Manager Thorne, if a developer is meeting with planning staff to get a sense of zoning and having early consultations on their development and hosting community consultations, does that qualify as inactivity?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the inactivity relates to exercising the demolition permit. So in that, my understanding is a lot of the work that the property owner was doing was around clearing some conditions related to heritage impact, the heritage impact assessment, the salvage plan, those types of things. There's also a fair bit of complicated work that's necessary to do around an engineering report as to how you would demolish a building of that stature. So that's what we look at in terms of whether there's activity on the demolition permit file. It's not about whether there's activity sort of on the planning application itself. They had proceeded to formal consultation. What we do typically recommend to applicants when they're going through an application process is to consult with the community prior to making planning application. That's what we suggest as good practice, and that's what they did in this case. Was prior to actually bringing forward formal planning application, they initiated the community consultations that Councillor Nan referenced.
If I could, through you, follow-up question. It's my understanding that the application included, as this motion does and as previous motions have, the joint address of Main Street and Holton Avenue. And I don't need to get into it here because this is committee work, hence me requesting to refer the matter back to Planning Committee. I'm not interested in, fundamentally at the end of the day, what I'm aiming to seek here from my colleagues is to push this back, refer it back to Planning Committee so that all the information that needs to be made available is made available. I have assurances, I have said to you all, and will continue saying, from the developer that they will not be submitting a demolition permit. I've also humbly requested you to consider me be the one to move the registry movement or the heritage designation movement. And it's primarily because I do have such deep respect for heritage. In fact, I'm an award winner of the Hamilton Heritage Committee for a property I co-owned on James Street North for the way in which we took care of the facade improvements and the window enhancements and the doors. We won an award for it. I have a deep appreciation for built heritage. So, you know, what Councillor Danko has said, Councillor Partridge has said, and Councillor Farr have said, and Councillor Marula has said, I balance those issues quite well in my professionalism as a councillor, but also in my own personal experience as a previous building owner in our city. And it wasn't a heritage designated building. So again, I just appeal to my colleagues to give me the carriage of my file, give me the carriage of this file, give me the carriage of being able to balance the heritage interests of the community, give me the carriage of balancing the needs of delivering affordable and mixed income housing. Should I need to, I'd be happy, and I'm requesting it humbly from all of you, to be the one to move the motion that Councillor Dankel has put on the table today. And in the future, if anybody does want to amend a motion, I would appeal to you all that you just let me know in advance that you're seeking to amend a motion that I'm bringing to council. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Pauls, Councillor Marula, and myself. Councillor Pauls.
Well, thank you. This has been an interesting conversation, but I just want to say, I want to thank Councillor Nan, because not only did she send me an email with the information, but we had at least a half-hour conversation on the phone. And she explained everything. And I just want to say that's very impressive. I do not know her ward very well, but she does. She knows the housing, affordable housing problem she's having. She knows, she doesn't know my ward, she doesn't know my ward, but she knows hers. So I am going to support her motion and not the amendment. And I have fully trust her with her judgment. So I just want to say a few comments. So thank you. Thank you, Councillor Knapp.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Marula. Can't hear you just yet, Councillor, unfortunately. You're still showing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. So if perhaps I can try to create some clarity on the issue. This really isn't an issue about Councillor Nan. It's not a trust issue about Councillor Nan. It really is a trust issue about the applicant. And to date, their only intent that they've displayed is demolition. Their demolition permit expired. They're reeling now, obviously, because it expired. They tried to fight to get it back, couldn't. Suddenly, at planning, they have this permit there that no one's aware of. Committee's blindsided by. The chair of the committee is obviously as concerned as I and the 3,000 people that have signed the petition already to save the church. And as I said to Councillor Nan, and she did reach out, but my understanding based on that reaching out was that demolition wasn't going to be on the table. What I'm kind of gathering from this is that they made some grave errors. Their permit expired. They have no other intention but to demolish. That's my intent. That's their intent. That's my belief right now based on their behavior. The last time I trusted a third party when a new councillor was on was Matt Green. And I remember it was over the LRT, and he promised me that by getting ATU involved, that somehow not only we're going to protect the LRT, but ATU, it was going to be a publicly owned thing. We lost the LRT because of it. I'm not going to do this again. I want assurance that that church is not going to be demolished. I said, I don't support demolishing it. Why would I support this referral to have demolition on the table? So all of you are technically supporting an option potentially of demolishing because that's still on the table. This is not about Councillor Nan. This is about the applicant. I do not trust them based on their behavior to date. Thanks very much for your time. Hope that clarifies any confusion.
Thank you. Councillor Farr, second time.
Yeah, I just want to say I thought the good councillor from Ward 3 was aware that it's not about her, but then I just heard her say that anytime you have an amendment, it'd be nice to hear about it in advance. And I just want to get on the record. That's a bit offensive to me because we did talk on the phone exactly about this amendment, about the Heritage Registry, and it looks like others have too. So unless I heard that wrong, this is not catching, this shouldn't be catching you off guard. And again, folks, I do believe the good counselor is going to find a happy median here, and she can take all the time she wants. This is not about Counselor Nan. I completely agree with the previous speaker. We have it within our rights to provide this buffer, to bring a security blanket to this issue. It's that simple. If you can't support, if you don't want to support it, I want to know why you don't want to support it. Not just, oh, well, we should just go with wherever the ward counselor wants to go. What? Why? I want to hear substantive why you don't want to throw a clear heritage structure onto a registry of 60 days to give us a buffer and some protection. It's just what we do. So a why would be a little bit better than just, no, let's status quo. But I just think it's important. I had to chime in one third time, Mr. Mayor, to hear that potentially the counselor is feeling caught off guard on this amendment that we're talking to right now. I mentioned this on the phone. We talked about this. So thank you.
All right,
Point of
thank
privilege.
you. Yeah, go ahead, Counselor, and then I'm going to call the question because we're we're kind of repeating ourselves at this point. So we're on the amendment, and Counselor Nan.
Point of privilege. Yes, Counselor Farr, you and I talked about it. Yes, Counselor Partridge and I talked about it. She asked me to consider it. However, I did not hear that there was going to be a motion to amend it coming forward by any of my colleagues. So let the record show. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're on the amendment now. The amendment is before you. Let's just refresh everybody what the amendment is, which is to put it on the registry. To designate it on the registry, Councillor Danko, you. Clear on the amendment? Okay, all in favor or opposed or otherwise? On the amendment only. And everyone's able to vote, Madam Clerk? Anyone need to indicate otherwise?
And that is defeated. That is defeated 5-9.
Okay, thank you. On the main motion, as presented by Councillor Nan, seconded by myself. All in favor or opposed? And again, Madam Clerk, everyone's able to get their votes in?
Yes, that is carried 13-0.
Thank you very much. Other items on the Planning Committee report, folks. Any other items that you would like to discuss?
Mr. Mayor, sorry,
yes,
I voted against that because I supported the deferral based on demolition not being on the table. Since it's on the table now, I'm not supporting the referral either. So it should have read, my opposition was not included in the clerk's comments.
Did you vote accordingly? Did you vote no?
Well, of course I did.
Okay.
That's why I interrupted.
Madam Clerk, did you not record it as such?
Mr. Mayor and Councillor Marula, you are recorded as against.
Okay. So
yes,
what was the vote?
13-1.
13-1. Thank you. Appreciate that. On the balance of the Planning Committee report, any issues beyond that? If not, we'll go to a vote on the balance of the report as moved by Councillor Danko, as amended. And Madam Clerk.
And that is carried 14-0.
Thank you very much. On the general report, Councillor Pauls, do you have a motion to put the report on the floor, please? Councillor Pauls, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
I'm mute. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
All right.
Great presentation.
that the General Issue Committee Report 21008, being the meeting held on Wednesday, April 7, 2021, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Thank you.
Okay. And a seconder for that was?
Councillor Genko.
Thank you. And Councillor Pauls, you understand have a housekeeping amendment on item number 3.
Yes, I do. And I'll
Okay.
just
Please
go on okay.
bring that forward if you would.
I will right now. That the recommendations of item 3 of the General Issue Committee Report 21008 respecting report LS 21013 PED 21091 Building Transit Faster Act 2020 be amended as follows. To clarify that the action are in response to the new regulation that makes the Hamilton LRT a priority project under the Building Transit Faster Act, which received a royal assent in 2020, therefore, in full force and effect, and is open for the comment until April 23rd, 2021. Building Transit Faster Act 2020 LS 21013 PED 21091 citywide item 10.2 that the city respond to the newly proposed regulation under the Building Transit Faster Act be delayed until such time as the city has heard from the delegation by Metrolink and the Ministry of Transportation with respect to the Building Transit Fact Act, and B, that the province be requested to extend the April 23rd, 2021 deadline for comments respecting the newly proposed regulation under the Building Transit Faster Act to provide the request delegation of Metrolink and the Ministry of Transportation time to attend an upcoming General Issue Committee meeting. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the operative changes on the motion are that the wording newly proposed regulation under the added item that legal believes should be required in the motion. Councillor Jackson.
Mr. Mayor, thanks. I'm fine with the amendment. I just have a general question after the amendment's approved on the main motion as amended. Thank you.
Okay. So on the amendment, just the housekeeping amendment, any comments or questions? If not, all in favor of the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, sorry, if we could just get a seconder on the amendment, please.
I don't recall Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson was the original mover of the motion, actually, as I recall it. So, thank you. And Madam Clerk?
Councillor Pauls, Councillor Pearson, and Councillor Clark. We're just waiting for the votes to come in, please.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I thought I had requested to speak. I think it's in the chat list.
On the motion, on the main motion?
On the amendment that's being proposed, the housekeeping amendment.
Was not aware of it at the time, so if we want to revert back, we could do that. Madam Clerk?
Yeah, we'll close that vote.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, sir. Trying to understand where the amendment is. I'm working from the document that was provided to us in eScribe, and I don't have the amendment in writing. So are we amending A, B? Are we creating a C? What exactly did we do?
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
The amendment is under attachments in eScribe under the General Issues Committee report. It's the second attachment.
Okay, I'm looking for it right now. Thank you.
And it was emailed out yesterday as well.
Again, the operative change or addition to the original motion was to add the words newly proposed regulations under, and then it goes on the Building Transit Faster Act. So originally it said that the city response to the Building Transit Faster Act be delayed until such time, which is the original motion. It now says that the city's response to the newly proposed regulation under the Building Transfer Act be delayed, and the rest of the balance of the recommendation in both A and B.
So thank you. And just a quick question to legal. This does not bind the province to any extension to the comment period. So I'm assuming that the ministry can proceed without our comments if this is the action that we take.
So through the chair, it's Michael Kine, acting city solicitor. That's correct. The ministry is not necessarily bound by the city's request to extend the deadline for the commenting period.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, can I request that A and B be severed then, please? Because I believe the city of Hamilton should be exercising its responsibility and providing comment on this new regulation. It's my expectation that the minister is not going to extend the deadline. It's incredibly rare. I can't recall the last time a deadline for comments was extended on a regulation. And they will likely just continue moving forward. And if we don't provide our position on it, then that's on us, not on them. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. We're still on the amendment though at this point. So the added words, it does not finalize A and B, or I'm sorry, it adds the words to A and B, and then we'll come back to the main motion. Are you asking to sever the main motion into A and B so you can vote on them separately?
That is correct, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to you at that point in time then. Councillor Jackson. No, you're on the main motion. So we're on the amendment. So on the amendment then, for the added words, all in favor or opposed at this point? And under the presumption that it's possibly carried. Madam Clerk.
That carries, Mr. Mayor, 13-1.
Thank you. Turn to Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I hope we keep in mind Councillor Clark's forewarned words about the ministry and the province hardly ever extend deadlines when it comes to grids in the fall. Anyways, back to this, Mr. Mayor. I know City Manager Smith and your office, Mr. Mayor, are working the phone lines feverishly to get a response from Metrolinx. And I want to know if either office has heard anything today that Metrolinx is desirous to attend and appear before council so we can have the fullness of debate of higher order of transit options, or are they potentially still snubbing us? Mr. Mayor, through you, please, to either the city manager, who has a great network with the province, or your fine staff. Mr. Mayor, please. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson, and through you, Deputy Mayor. So yes, I have had conversations with both Metrolinx and MTO officials, and I do not believe they're snubbing us. I talked to them about ensuring that they come at the same time, so there can be a fulsome discussion with both representatives there. They could not give me an exact time frame yesterday when I talked to them, but they are looking at it, and they also are aware of the request to extend the deadline for the commenting period for the regulation change, because they understand that for council to comment, they need to understand the bigger picture. So I will continue to push to come on the agenda as soon as possible.
Thank you. And for myself,
yes,
Councillor, we've been in touch with the Premier's office to let them know the Council's request. Again, they haven't given us a specific time, but they have not said at any point in time that they're not prepared to come.
That's right.
Mr. Mayor and City Manager Smith, Ward 6 thanks you for that, and Ward 6 is waiting with bated breath to hear more from the ministry and from Metrolinx. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Clark on the main motion now.
Yes, sir. Can I ask Mr. Zagaric or the city manager, have we verified what the formula would be for the sharing of the capital costs between the three levels of government?
Mike Zagaric.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't the details necessary to have that conversation with Ministry of Transportation and Metrolinx. We are familiar with the other jurisdictions under the Moving Ontario initiative that started back, I believe, in 2015, and so those are those projects within GTA proper. We're also aware of York Region. And in the case of York Region, Ministry of Transportation and York Region did enter into a memorandum of understanding and an agreement as it relates to the Yonge Street subway extension. And in the case of that agreement, the parties agreed to what's referred to as the ISIP formula, and councillors may be familiar with the ISIP formula in that municipalities contribute approximately 27% of the share of transit investments, and it's similar to the applications we put forward under the ISIP transit stream. So to the councillor's question, we are familiar with the GTA proper programs, and the one exception to that formula would be the agreement involving York Region and Ministry of Transportation.
Thank you.
And if I could add, sorry, Councillor.
Oh, go ahead. By all means, thank you.
Jeanette Smith here through you, Deputy Mayor. The only thing I would add on to Mike is, there is no standard formula across the province in terms of how these higher order transit projects have been funded. So Mike Zagaric just mentioned the most recent one with York Region, which we have a copy of. But then there's other models where there's no capital requirements from the municipalities. So from my conversations to date, I think it's fair to say there is no determination yet on what a potential financing or funding strategy would look like. They're focusing right now on both the provincial and federal government contributions. But that's the question we said that council will want to hear when they come.
Thank you. And so have we heard that the province is willing to spend more than $1 billion of the $3.5 billion capital costs for LRT?
So I'm just going to be mindful of the clerk reminding me that that is not the topic of conversation that we have in the motion. So you're beyond building the Transit Faster Act regulation that we're actually speaking to today. So I know you're going to push back, but this was coming from the clerk, not from me.
And I have a right to raise a concern about it. The context of this is how we respond to the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't understand the financial complications, then how do we respond to this regulation? And so I'm asking very sincerely, has the province indicated that they're willing to pay more than $1 billion? Because if the ISIP proposal is 27% usually to the municipality, we're talking 27% of $3.5 billion. And the only way that changes is with the province picking up more than $1 billion and the feds picking up more than $1 billion. So has anyone indicated a willingness to the province and the feds that they're going to spend more than $1 billion on transit, LRT? I think it's a fair question before we vote on this.
Yeah, and I don't think our staff can answer because they've not been involved in any conversations or discussions around LRT, quite frankly. There has been my discussions with the federal and provincial governments have always been based on 100% funding, capital funding from the feds, from the province, and that any additional commitment beyond what we had originally agreed to in the original agreement of the day-to-day operating was a non-starter. And so that message has been translated to them, numerous times. Where they land as they evolve their conversations, which they are, I understand, having, is unknown to me, and I think unknown to staff.
Thank you for your response. I guess the challenge is we don't know who's talking to the feds in the province on behalf of the municipality, because it certainly isn't the council. We have not been privy to any of these discussions. So I request once again to sever A and B. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So to A and B then, on item A, as moved with the amendment attached, all in favor? Or opposed? And we'll do the same for item B.
We're just waiting for Councillor Vanderbeeks to come through.
Okay, thank you.
And we have it.
Perfect.
Item A carries 13-1.
Thank you. And then on item B, as amended.
And item B carries 14-0.
Thank you. The balance of the General Issues Committee report. Any other in that report that you would like to discuss, amend, or otherwise? I'm not seeing any indication at this point. Madam Clerk, anyone on the speakers list? If not, it has been moved in second on the report as amended now. All in favor? Or opposed? Madam Clerk, everyone's able to vote?
And the balance of the report carries 14-0.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to turn to the Finance Committee report of April the 8th. Councillor Ferguson, a motion to put that report on the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pearson, that the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee report 2105005 be the meeting held on Thursday, April the 8th, 2021, be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Perfect, thank you. And a seconder for that was, did I miss it?
Councillor Pearson, the Vice Chair.
Thank you. And any items on the report that you would like to speak to? Seeing none, thank you. On the balance of the report then, all in favor? We have not had any abstentions today, which is good. And I still think we need some background music for those quiet moments, those awkward pauses.
And that carries, Mr. Mayor, 14-0.
Thank you. Turning to the Community Services Committee report, Councillor Nan, a motion on the report, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The Emergency and Community Services Committee report 21-003, being the meeting held on Thursday, April 8th, 2021, be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Moved by myself and seconded by Vice Chair Tom Jackson.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on the report? Not seeing any indication. Councillor Farr, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I indicated with the little microphone, Mr. Mayor. And as for the awkward, quiet pauses, just call on me. I can fill them easily with commentary on any topic. I just want to highlight
too. I just don't know what topic we would want to get into. I can fill the void, but it may not be positive.
Yeah, I think the large majority of them, you'd probably be better off with the MUSAC system.
Yes.
Okay, so just on 3, the support for the Rapid Housing Initiative affordable housing development projects. Our housing and homelessness staff probably worked very, very hard, and they should be recognized on this of the many other files they're working on. And I just want to point out something we've been working on together in Corktown for some time. And this is crossing another barrier or finish line, if you will, in a marathon, but it means a lot for the Corktown Co-op. So I just wanted to point out that in that item, there's funding we're advising the ministry of in the amount of approximately $820,000. And I'm so pleased, and I'm sure all the residents of the Corktown Co-op Affordable Housing Development Board are just as pleased in this request for a proposal. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to get that out there. See how I can fill time?
You know, we know you can do that endlessly. Thank you so much. Much appreciated, and it's a great project and worthy of support for sure. Also on the report itself, any other comments? If not, all in favor?
Sorry,
Opposed?
Councillor Jackson had some comments, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Jackson. I didn't see that fervent waving until the very last second. My apologies.
I'll ramp up my pantomiming, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, on item 2, the age-friendly plan 2021 to 2026, I would respectfully ask for a separate vote from council on that. Mr. Mayor, just want to refresh everyone's memory on council and in the community. We were one of the first of over 100 cities across the world in 2014 that adopted an age-friendly plan, primarily for our seniors, older adults, and frail elderly members of our population. We had an excellent presentation, Mr. Mayor, last week at ECS committee chaired by Councillor Nan, where Dr. Lori Letts appeared on behalf of the Hamilton Council on Aging, and our project manager, Lisa Maychuk, appeared on behalf of the City of Hamilton, and of course, the Seniors Advisory Committee as well. And what we've heard, Mr. Mayor, is that there continues to be strategic goals, objectives, and recommendations moving forward. I think past council of the last term and this council should be very proud of the fact, Mr. Mayor, that seniors and older adults programs, services, facilities continue to be top of mind, both in an intangible way and more importantly in a tangible way, primarily through our operating and capital budgets. And Mr. Mayor, there's a new component in this age-friendly adopted plan that I learned about last week that was very impressive. And I'll read to you a statement from the joint presentation from Seniors Advisory Committee, Hamilton Council on Aging, and the City of Hamilton. By the way, Mr. Mayor, what a great tri-party partnership we have with those three organizations leading our city and looking after the affairs of seniors. I'll read you a statement with the new component that, consistent with our commitment to social inclusion, Mr. Mayor, we are pleased to be one of the first cities globally to specifically integrate a dementia-friendly approach into our age-friendly plan. Mr. Mayor, not only, of course, I think our community has been supportive of those individuals and those families who have individuals with Alzheimer's and dementia issues, and that we try as a corporation to provide greater resources for those with dementia. But this was all about from Dr. Letts from the Council on Aging, telling us that we want to recognize the fact that those with dementia can be very productive contributing citizens in our community as well, should not be forgotten. And hence that's a new component in this adopting of the plan for the next 5 years moving forward, that inclusive of the dementia-friendly aspect, along with all the other wonderful objectives and goals of the age-friendly plan. Mr. Mayor, I know our City of Hamilton thinks highly of our seniors, and we have demonstrated it in past councils and this council time and time again. And I think it's important that we reaffirm that positive message in the community. Thanks so much, Mr. Mayor. And again, respectfully, I think it's important enough we have a separate vote on item 2. Thank you.
All right, and I think our message in our mission statement confirms the desire to make sure that people age successfully in our community, and I think that's part and parcel of the good work that the age-friendly plan has done for us, and I really do appreciate the update of adding dementia as part of being age-friendly as well. So thank you. And a separate motion or a separate request to vote on item 2. So on item 2, all in favor or additional comments? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut anyone off. I didn't see any additional. Nope. Okay, thank you. All in favor?
And that carries, Mr. Mayor, 14-0.
Thank you. And on the balance report as presented, all in favor of that as amended?
And the balance of the report carries 14-0.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor, a motion to rise from committee of the whole, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was wrong. On your
Councillor
list
Pauls.
there, it's Councillor Pauls. So
You're right. It is Councillor Pauls.
Thank you.
I'm just going to reread it again. Councillor Nan, may I have a, no, okay, never mind. Councillor Pauls, could I have a motion to rise from committee of the whole, please?
Thank you, Mayor. That the committee of the whole rise and report.
Perfect. And a seconder for that would be?
Councillor Nan.
Yeah, good choice. Excellent. Any comments or questions on that? If not, all in favor? Up. Lickety split. Okay, and then we have a follow-up notice of motion. Once we get confirmation of the clerk's
and that carries 14-0.
affirmation of all of our previous reports, I'm going to turn to Councillor Vanderbilt. Motion on Conservation Authorities Act and the Trespass to Property Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a notice of motion, and so I will be asking to waive the rules.
Okay.
So it would be moved by myself and seconded by. Sorry.
Councillor Partridge, I see as a volunteer.
Oh. Oh, I thought you wanted to ask me a question. Sorry. Okay, I'll go back to that. So thank you, Councillor Partridge, but I have already got support from Councillor Ferguson because this does involve the Conservation Authority, and so he of course wants to be supportive.
Of course. So on waiving the rules then, all in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Danko, do you want to speak to the waiving of the rules?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
So could I just ask what the time sensitivity is of this? I do have some legal concerns about overreach with federal and provincial authority, and I'd appreciate having time to discuss that with legal in advance.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, I'll just answer that. This actually, we thought we had this solved, but there's an extra step or so. And so it came up at a waterfalls meeting on Monday afternoon. The waterfalls are open. The Webster's 2s and the Peak will be open by reservation only on May 1st. This is only if necessary. It will be, so the urgency to it is that we really need to get it in place. We had a very significant rope rescue in Dundas on Friday evening. So what we're needing is what the Conservation Authority is needing, and it is sort of explained in here, and I will read it when we get to the motion. So perhaps if we could just move past getting the rules waived for the urgency, then I will read the motion, and then I'm happy to take a question or explain or have staff explain. This motion was written by staff, vetted by staff at MLE. It was vetted through legal. So legal is well aware of this motion and in agreement with moving forward with it. So if I could get to the motion, I'd appreciate that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Danko.
Oh, respectfully, I didn't really hear why it was time sensitive, specifically why it had to be moved today.
Okay. So I'll just give you my perspective, and I see that Councillor Ferguson wants to speak to it too. These issues continue. We have no way of, we have no ability as a city to go onto conservation land and to help conservation to enforce things on the conservation land. The only people who can enforce some of that is the police they simply do not have the resources. And so by the Conservation Authority being able to appoint our bylaw officers as provincial offenses officers, which they are, but to appoint them as conservation's provincial offenses officer, if necessary, they can be called in and they can lay charges under the Conservation Authorities Act and the Act of Trespass on behalf of conservation. And we are already experiencing an influx in these problems and with no way to enforce anything. And so it's happening, it's increasing. We thought we had this looked after, but there's another step we have to take according to legal. And that's why this is coming forward. Things are escalating as the weather improves and the lockdown is not helping it. And so I'm going to turn the floor over through the mayor. If he wishes to have Councillor Ferguson speak to it on behalf of
So we're speaking to the urgency of waiving the rules. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The urgency is that the attendance at the conservation areas continues to boom. It's just blowing away, and the lockdown, quite frankly, is not helping because people can go outside and they're going over to enjoy the amazing conservation areas that we have. We have a few, I'm not sure the exact number because they tend to fluctuate, but we try to appoint our site superintendents, our conservation area superintendents, to be able to issue infractions. But with the large crowds coming, they just can't keep up with that. They're busy with all the other duties that they're expected to do. So when Councillor Vanderbeek contacted me about this, and Conservation Authority staff fully endorsed what this motion is trying to do and the urgency of it, because there's some unsafe situations happening where people come in and go into areas they shouldn't. And most of the time, we just don't have the resources to handle it with our own enforcement people. So this allows us the opportunity legally then to ask bylaw to assist us when required. So we are very supportive of it.
Thank you. Councillor Danko, you asked the question.
No, I think that's a sufficient answer. I'll ask those questions of staff on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marula on waiving the rules.
Oh, no, I'd like to be first on the motion. That's all. I support waiving the rules.
All right, let's get to waiving the rules. So that was moved and seconded. All in favor of waiving the rules, or anyone opposed? And with respect, Councillor Marula, I'll turn to Councillor Vanderbeek first, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do apologize.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, waiving the rules carries 14-0.
Thank you. We're just moving along. We just made some assumptions, but thanks for the clarity on that. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you. I am going to read this so the public know what it's about. Whereas requests for bylaw enforcement at Hamilton waterfall areas continue to increase, and City Council at its 2021 budget meeting approved the hiring of additional enforcement staff to establish a pilot project for the enforcement of waterfall areas where challenges have been identified. Whereas despite many City Council approved regulations and increased fines, regular enforcement, and other improvement measures being enacted and conducted, as well as a reservation system being tested by the Hamilton Conservation Authority. And I do want to point out that that in this, there is one mention here of Hamilton Region Conservation Authority. The region needs to be deleted. It's in the final paragraphs. Increased visitors to the waterfall areas, the Dundas Peak conservation areas within the city continue to have negative impacts on area residents. And whereas additional measures are required to enforce offenses and regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act and the Trespass to Property Act at waterfall areas under the jurisdiction of Hamilton Conservation Authority, therefore be it resolved that staff from licensing and bylaw services work with the city's legal department and with Hamilton Conservation Authority to formalize the appointment of city staff as provincial offenses officers to enforce offenses and regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act, in addition to the Trespass to Property Act, when carrying out their duties on property under the jurisdiction of the Hamilton Conservation Authority, and that the Director of Licensing and Bylaw Services be authorized to sign any agreements between the City of Hamilton and the Hamilton Conservation Authority or other documentation as required to facilitate city enforcement staff's enforcement of offenses and regulations under the Act and on property under the jurisdiction of the Hamilton Conservation Authority, provided such agreements are satisfactory to the city solicitor. And if I could just speak to it for one more minute. This is something that Conservation Authority, the Waterfalls Group, have been recognized, have been working on for quite some time because of the frustration of not being able to not only enforce, but to let people know that they can be enforced. So it's not just about let's all run in there and ticket them. It's about letting them know that our officers are there and they are able to enforce if you're in places you shouldn't be, or if you're there after hours when the place is closed. If you're doing things that are dangerous, they can enforce for being off trails and things like that as well, if necessary. And it would be at the call of conservation. So conservation would call in the city bylaw in order to assist where needed and when needed. But at this moment, we're not able to do that. And so as Councillor Ferguson said, this is in conjunction with the requests from conservation and the Waterfalls Working Group in particular's recognition that it's not just Dundas Peak and Webster's and Twos that's the problem. That problem exists at Tiffany, at Sherman, at Devil's Punch Bowl. It sometimes occurs at Christie and Valens and perhaps Confederation Park. And it's not that these bylaw people would be proactively going out necessarily on a regular basis. It is that they may be there occasionally, and it is that they would be available if required to come in and help conservation to enforce the rules that are there for conservation to be enforced, and that conservation staff are not able to keep up with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just for the clerk, we can strike region from all of the Hamilton Conservation Authority statements that are in there. I think comes up about 4 times. Is that?
Yes, please.
Do we need an amendment to do that, or will you just do that as course of your work?
We will just do that.
Thank you.
Minutes.
All righty, thank you. Councilor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, and I support this fully, and I'm wondering, I think it's a brilliant idea, and I'm wondering if we can expand upon it. So I have a question for Ken. Ken, I see is Ken here?
I
Ken
suspect he would be. Ken Leendurst.
I am, Councillor.
Sure. There he is.
Sir, how you doing, sir? Okay, with respect to, for instance, the Kenilworth stairs, and this is an issue that I'm having as we speak. So daily as I go there, I notice that I'm the only one wearing a mask. So I reached out to a number of our bylaw officers, and they're feeling very frustrated because they're approaching these individuals, but they're not providing ID. People are on to the fact that our bylaw officers are very limited when it comes to enforcement. The Kenilworth Stairs happens to cross the Bruce Trail, which is managed by the Conservation Authority. Would we not be able to do the same with respect to the stairs, the Wentworth Stairs, the Kenilworth Stairs, or any other park, Confederation Park, where it's managed by the Conservation Authority? Could we not provide our officers with that authority to basically enforce laws, these greater laws that they have on all of our Conservation Authority managed properties? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ken.
Thank you.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, a very good question. The stairs and most of the city parks are actually controlled by the Parks Act, and we've had some great success. Of course, there is no arrest authority under this act, and of course, our bylaw officers would never have that. What you do mention, though, is a violation of the ROA or the EMCPA, the provincial regulations involving this pandemic. And if a person fails to identify themselves, as there's a new offense of obstructing a a peace officer. And what we do in that situation is that we would call the police, and the police would have the authority to arrest that individual, to properly identify, and we would lay a charge. The additional charge, although one charge for not wearing your mask appropriately or not wearing it or not physically distancing is about $880. A charge for obstruct is an additional $1,000. And we have laid numerous obstruct charges. So you raised a very good point, but we do have the authority. But this also, this motion gives us a little more authority to act within the conservation authority area. Right now, if we find someone climbing a wall in a conservation area or trespassing or putting themselves in danger, we don't even have the authority to ask them to leave the park. And so this this motion gives us the authority and delegated authority under the Trespass to Property Act, which allows us to ask people to leave and not become dangerous. And we also have the authority to lay charges on their conservation authority. Now, the interesting thing is this isn't not new. This is actually, we're following the model that Toronto actually used in their conservation authority. And so that's the change, that we just need this delegated authority from the conservation authority to allow us to act on their behalf for trespassing as well as under the Conservation Act.
Also, just point of clarity through you, Mr. Mayor. So this does blanket all of their properties. It's just not specific to the falls.
Through the mayor, that is correct. Once we have the
perfect.
authority,
Okay.
any
Sorry.
conservation
I
authority,
misunderstood.
we could act at any of the areas that are giving us trouble. In particular, as you know, Devil's Punch Bowl has been quite active, and Spencer's Gorge and all that. So, and in particular, Webster Falls seems to have been boiled over in the last couple of weeks.
This is a really good initiative. I want to thank Arlene for bringing it forward, and thank you very much, sir, for your time.
And Albion Falls, which I haven't heard yet today, but is a continuing problem as well. So I mean, it's unfortunately happening everywhere. Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I have to agree with Councillor Murillo. This is a very good initiative. Just two quick questions. Devil's Punch Bowl, we had loosely saying an individual climb the cross and stand on the cross like he was a superhero. Would this change enable us to lay charges or fines or whatever the language is against that type of behavior?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Devil's Punch Bowl is a very interesting location because half of the park belongs to the city of Hamilton. The other half belongs to the Conservation Authority. So we would be powerless if without this legislation. And so if we find someone defacing any of the Conservation Authority, there are numerous charges that we can lay under the Conservation Act as well as Trespass to Property Act and getting stopped doing prohibited activity.
So, and you raised the point, and I know we've been dealing with this on an ongoing basis at Devil's Punch Bowl. There's a part of the property which is municipal, and then the part of it is the conservation area. So now it doesn't really matter whether someone is climbing down or climbing up the property that's municipal or conservation, if we're finding people are putting themselves at risk or others at risk, namely first responders. And we've already had, I think, 2 rescues, Ken, at the Devil's Punch Bowl this year, and it's early in the season. So this change will capture those types of behavior, and fines can be laid. Is that a fair understanding?
Through the mayor, that is correct. This gives us the authority and the power to make sure the community is safe and get rid of the trespassers.
Okay, and I have one last question, Mr. Mayor. So we're making this change in order to be fair to the community. Will there be signage placed around these conservation areas indicating that there are penalties for scaling a 150-foot waterfall? How are we going to make sure that the hikers are aware at the base of the falls that they should not be climbing up, and if they do, they could find themselves with financial penalties?
Thank you. Ken?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a great question because we have had this conversation with legal before. As you know, Albion Falls, where the council directed us to be very aggressive in our enforcement to stop the problem there. Legal has told us that we don't need signage to tell people to not be scaling the walls. It's a general knowledge you shouldn't be doing that. We always use the progressive enforcement approach where we try to educate and create awareness, but eventually we do have to charge. There are so many possible offenses under the Conservation Act as well as our parks bylaw that I think we'd end up having a lot of signage out to tell them all the activities that are prohibited. So generally should be a general knowledge that you don't throw garbage over, that you don't scale the walls. But there are specific signs about being in a prohibited area that is already signed in a lot of those locations. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
And not to ever disagree with our legal department, Mr. Mayor.
I sense there's a butt coming.
Yeah. I hate doing this. But my concern is that while we legally could argue you should be aware that you can't do this, there are many young people who are not aware that they can't do this, and many of the people who we have to rescue are young people who through misadventure have now found themselves stuck to the side of the wall and they can't go up or they can't come down. It just seems to me out of a sense of fairness that there should be signage, not everywhere, but around some of these falls where this danger has been frequently occurring, that we notify them that, you know what, you can't be climbing it because there's going to be penalties. I'm not trying to be facetious, but I don't know how we can start implementing the bylaws in the manner that we're talking about without notifying folks that you really can't. It's great to hike up inside, but you can't hike up the side of the escarpment, and there seems to be no signage to that effect. So I'll leave it as a comment without requesting any direction, but I have a problem with that. We need to make sure that we have an awful lot of newcomers, a lot of new people coming to Hamilton from the GTA. They love our waterfalls. They love hiking the waterfalls. And in their minds, when I've talked to them, and I've talked to a lot of them at Devil's Punch Bowl, they don't see the disconnect between hiking and scaling up the escarpment to get a better picture. That's all they're doing. They don't see the problem with that. And so we need to educate them is my point. Thank you, sir, for the time and latitude. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to Ken, I believe, I'm just concerned that I don't want Grindstone Falls in Waterdown to be forgotten. I have not heard the falls mentioned at all. It's not in the motion. I don't know if it needs to be, but you know, Grindstone has also a very unique ownership to it. And I just like a comment from Ken, if I can. We've got, even during the week now, not even waiting for the weekends, you know, there could be 1,000 people converging on poor little Waterdown and on that falls, and there's parking for like 15 cars. So Ken, is any of this going to be pulled away from Grindstone?
Through the mayor, Councillor, great point. Just so you know, since we started the project on March 15th, we've already laid 2 charges up in Grindstone. So it is part of our proactive enforcement area. We know that the problems you're experiencing up there. We know that it's a hotspot across the GTA for slacklining, which obviously puts a lot of people at risk. And so no, my answer would be that we will continue to make this a special attention, similar to a lot of the hotspots that we have from Shadok Falls to Albion Falls. We are really going to make sure that when we get these problems, that we'll be able to respond accordingly.
Yes, and thank you, Ken. And it's my understanding that the falls themselves and the parking lot are owned by the city. They are not owned by the Conservation Authority. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. This is one of the city-owned parks, and so we currently use the parks bylaw, and hence why we've laid 2 charges already for people that are violating where they shouldn't be.
I appreciate you mentioning, Mr. Mayor, the slacklining. It was just brought to my attention last summer that the Grindstone Falls is actually being promoted out in BC as a great spot in Southern Ontario for slacklining. And for anyone that doesn't know what that means, they literally attach lines vertically across, horizontally across the falls itself. And there could be 5 or 6 lines going up the falls, and then people are walking across them. It is extremely dangerous. And I'm very glad that that's on your radar. We're also grindstones being promoted in Toronto on websites and magazines. I've had them sent to me, and I'm just horrified at the thousands of people that are converging coming in, and they may start at Grindstone, but they're going to all the other waterfalls as well. So I appreciate your answers. I would just like to remind council that it seems to me the city was sued because there was in the past, because there was a lack of signage on a toboggan hill. And just to Councillor Clark's point, people don't necessarily assume or understand what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. So I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you. I fully support. Great motion.
Great, thank you. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Where to start? I guess, I've supported parking enforcement at the waterfalls. I understand the crush of people coming in to explore these areas. I don't, and I never have supported the enforcement at Albion Falls, but that was before my time. And I'm concerned that basically what we're doing here is we're regulating personal responsibility. And I've heard through this discussion people doing things that are dangerous, putting themselves at risk, that they're scaling waterfalls, which somehow equals trespassing, or that slacklining is dangerous. And there's a scale of risk for each person, and it's really up to you as to know your individual limits and to know what you're capable of. And what looks dangerous, such as slacklining, to one person is perfectly safe to somebody else. And I'm concerned that we're starting to get into this where we're trying to regulate through the Conservation Act or by issuing tickets what should be somebody's personal responsibility, and we're trying to control how people interpret and explore the natural areas in our city. And so what I mentioned off the top, I guess, is some of the overreach. So can I just ask through you to staff specifically, are these officers going to be patrolling the conservation areas, the private property, or will they actually be stationed, in the water course, such as we're doing at Albion Falls?
Ken Leaders.
Good question, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The 2 new officers that this council has approved will be doing periodic checks in all the hotspots, and so the Albion Falls Ambassador Program is separate and aside from this. So you have the 4 ambassadors that direct people to make sure that they stay on the trail and stay out of the falls. But these will actually really focus in on the hot spots and try to solve some of the issues that I think as counselors you're all experiencing from people that are following, like similar to on the weekend where we had 8 fire department units dispatched to rescue a person that had fallen off the cliff and very seriously injured. So what we'll try to do is use those resources to educate, create awareness. They have the ability to enforce, but that's not our focus. Our focus has always been on education and awareness. But there's some people that just don't want to listen to us and say, I don't care, I want to scale the falls because I think I'm quite capable of doing that. And it puts not only that individual at risk, but our first responders, as well as causes damage to these natural areas. So I guess the short answer is proactively, we will gather and look at all the problem areas.
Thank you. Councillor Danko.
And a couple of questions, if I could, to Mr. Kind, to legal. So my understanding is that the watercourse is protected through the Navigable Waters Protection Act, which is a federal authority it protects the right of navigation and access. And through the Ontario jurisdiction, there's the Beds of Navigable Waters Act, which defines the beds as Crown land, and you can't trespass on Crown land. And the bed of a watercourse is traditionally described as anywhere between the high water marks. So if you have somebody that is hiking up the actual watercourse, I'm not sure how we enforce trespassing regulations on them if they are on Crown land, or what it could be defined as Crown land. And if you don't think Spencer Creek or one of our Red Hill or any of our creeks would be defined as a navigable waterway, I'd suggest maybe try to build a bridge across it, and you'll find out pretty fast from Transport Canada that it's in fact defined as a navigable waterway. So I think my point is that we have control over what's private property, what is city property, what is conservation authority property as defined as the property. But once we start talking about the watercourse itself, there are some variables there, and there are rights to access that I believe are perhaps through federal and provincial authority beyond the city of Hamilton.
Okay. Through you to Michael Kine, City Solicitor.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Danko, for that question. So let me start my answer by saying, if you look at the motion itself, it's primarily driven by a gap in resources. So the offenses, such as they are, already exist. What the motion proposes is that the Conservation Authority be able to draw on the assistance when needed of city bylaw enforcement staff to assist with enforcement of existing offenses on properties that are owned by the Conservation Authority. So to the degree that there's a jurisdictional gap, i.e. do city bylaw enforcement officers have the legislated authority to enforce on Conservation Authority property? That's what this motion seeks to address. With respect to your question on navigable waters, as the discussion has indicated, this applies to all Conservation Authority property. To the degree that there's water on any or all of those properties, the definition as to whether or not federal jurisdiction is triggered, i.e. is it truly navigable water, would have to be adjudged on a case-by-case basis. And I'd suggest that the passage of this motion does not affect that calculation. Where that assessment or calculation might become germane is if somebody wanted to assert that as a defense to a particular offense. The right to access, which you also referred to, you may have the ability to access navigable water. It may be under federal jurisdiction, but if you have to traverse somebody else's property to get there, that's still, if you don't have permission, that's still contrary to the Trespass Act. And the last point I'm going to make is, and this doesn't speak directly to your question, is and this is something that can only come from legal, I suggest, is the proper name is the Hamilton Region Conservation Authority. I just checked under the legislation. I don't think it changes candidly the intent of the motion, whether you use the colloquial name Hamilton Conservation Authority or the proper legal name Hamilton Region Conservation Authority. So I'll just offer that observation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danko, I think that's almost time for you, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to pursue the point any further, but just to the point of, I'm concerned that we're again overreaching as a municipality, especially when it comes to use of a watercourse, and I'm gonna have to vote against this motion in principle. I don't have any problem with the enforcement on the private property side, but again, we're getting into areas where we're trying to regulate personal responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to weigh in other than to offer my strong support to Councillor Vanderbeek in her motion, but since Albion Falls has been referenced a few times, boy, to some members of council with one incident in front of City Hall that caused them to support 700 grand for barricades around the forecourt of City Hall now, I can assure you that prior to 4 years ago at Albion Falls, a little history lesson, Mr. Mayor, I used to experience on average about 25 to 30 rope rescues every summer for about 5, 6 summers leading up to the summer of 2017. The neighborhood of Albion Falls, the residential community in the area of the East Mountain, abutting Albion Falls, just got, they were on pins and needles every weekend, just waiting for the paramedic trucks and the fire trucks to arrive for another rope rescue, because of lack of common sense, carelessness, irresponsible exploration activity, mostly by out-of-towners who wanted to come to Albion Falls to explore one of the prestigious natural areas of our city. And so 4 years ago, Mr. Mayor, with council support, I was pleased, unanimous support, and primarily through Councillor Marula and Councillor Collins as well, whose wards are below Albion Falls, we spent $75,000 to put up additional black iron fencing, extending the existing fencing at Albion Falls and adding new fencing and new height as further structural barricades to cordon off the area because of, unfortunately, the number of trips and falls that were occurring at Albion Falls. And we also implemented the ambassador program that Senior Director Ken Leenders has spoken to, and with the focus and emphasis on Albion Falls as the specific site targeted location. I make no apologies for garnering council support 4 years ago to implement the ambassador program and starting it with and putting lots of resources at Albion Falls, given the increased popularity and one of the highest increased popularities of visitation from outside our city that was coming to explore Albion Falls. Mr. Mayor, I also set up about 4 years ago an Albion Falls task force made up of citizens, made up of stakeholders that are involved with trails and the Hamilton Burling Trails Council and those that are part of falls cleanups, and along with our professional staff and in consultation with the Hamilton Conservation Authority, CAO Lisa Burnside, who once in a while sits at the table. And I rely on the Albion Falls Task Force in planning for what we can do in the future at this very popular location. And as you know, Mr. Mayor, we're still in the midst of sending out public consultation for a possible beautiful stairway that could be built from the top of Mountain Brow Boulevard and circle with a cantilever right in front of the beautiful Albion Falls, if we can put proper design and ultimately seek council support down the road. So, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say all that. And in the last 4 years with the ambassador program, directional signage, the increased amount of fencing and barricades that were installed there, Mr. Mayor, and with tons of tickets being handed out to those that, in spite of warnings, in spite of education, still want to trespass and violate the city's parks bylaw, Mr. Mayor, in the last 4 years, to my knowledge, my office's records, we've only had one serious incident. Prior to that, 25 to 30 rope rescues a year. And Mr. Mayor, sadly, 1 or 2 fatalities as well. And so I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, anything more we can do, especially for those, to conclude, we have now a nice problem on our hands, I've dubbed it, with our waterfalls and the waterfalls campaign. It's nice that so many visitors to Hamilton have come to see, recognize, and appreciate the beauty, Mr. Mayor, of our city. Sadly, it's created a new problem for us because of the magnitude of the visitation to these beautiful areas and where people want to explore nature in a greater fashion. But it's created a problem for us, and we've just been, if you will, pedaling faster to try to catch up to the increased popularity and visitations at these falls. So to conclude, that's why I'm further supporting Councillor Vanderbeek's initiative. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. And I see no further speakers, so I'm going to go back to the original motion, moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? And opposed? And yes, important debate around.
We're waiting for Councillor Ferguson's vote, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, I'm not sure that
he's available.
Yeah.
We can put him as absent.
So he's also a seconder on the motion. So we need another seconder. Councillor Partridge, thank you.
Councillor Partridge was second, and that carries 12-1.
Thank you. Yes, an important issue for sure, and a an interesting problem to have, but we need to make it safe. I'm going to turn to statements by members at this point. We have no further items, no further notices of motions or motions. So in terms of statements by members, I'll start with Councillor Clark and work my way up this time. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very kind of you. I just want to let the residents in Ward 9 know that my annual report has been printed and it has been mailed. They should be receiving it, if they haven't already, in the next day or two. If they don't receive a copy, please contact my office and we'll be more than happy to get them a copy. It's also available on my website, bradclarkreport.com. So you can actually see the 8-page annual report there that outlines things that we have accomplished last year and things that are going to be happening in 2021, specifically road repairs, sidewalk repairs, parks, et cetera, et cetera. We've got an awful lot of construction that will be happening in 2021. And I just ask for the residents' patience as we move through it because it will be much better when it's all done. Other than that, I thank you, sir, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. And yeah, you're right. We're heading into construction season, and that'll apply just about everywhere. And there's only one way to do it, and that's to get in there and do it and get it done. And we'll do it as safely and quickly as we can. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and certainly thank you for coming around the horseshoe the other way. I haven't got a lot today other than, as was mentioned earlier, construction. So we have 2 seasons in Canada, winter and construction. So, and especially in light of the ongoing COVID lockdowns and children being at home, I'm going to say it's no different than summertime now with young ones being out there. Please be careful and drive safe. And most importantly, Mr. Mayor, I am out in the community very little unless I'm in my car driving. But I know that I had to have a phone repair yesterday, and it really, really is concerning to see the number of young people that are congregating en masse without masks. And I don't know how we can strive to strengthen the concern of COVID, that we all have to stay safe until we can all get vaccinated. So certainly sending that message out there as clearly as I can, especially when talking to residents in the ward by phone most often. So, but again, to all my colleagues as well, please stay safe and we continue to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor, for being late, very late. So I have a couple of things, if you don't mind. First of all, I want to thank everyone who nominated a Glanbrook Pandemic Hero. We received 12 of the most sensational stories of residents who went above and beyond helping their community members during these awful times. In fact, each one of these stories are so wonderful, we're giving out a thank you gift to each nominee because they were all winners. The second thing is we're getting overwhelming calls for people who are out walking and see messes and they want to clean them up. So we're getting some spring cleanup packages put together. So, and it's restricted to those that are living into the same house. So if you want to go out and tidy up your neighborhood, please do give us a call, email us, and we'll drop off a little package for you. But please keep it within your household. Good news now, I received my first AstraZeneca shot last week because I'm over the age of 60. I never thought I'd be so happy to be old. And I received the second one soon. And I encourage everyone who is over 60 to please phone and book your time. And congratulations to my assistant, Kristen Demick, and her husband, Neil Roth, on the birth of their baby girl. Josie Juliana Roth was born healthy and happy to see everybody, and we can't wait till everything's over with and we can give her a good squeeze and a hug. So, and I just wanted to pass on condolences to my other assistant, Kathy Dinney, on the loss of her mother-in-law, Myrna Dinney. So anyway, thank you everyone. And I'm again, apologies for being late.
Thank you. And just so you got the AstraZeneca at a pharmacy and you called the pharmacy?
Yep, I called Bimbrook Pharmacy and they had a cancellation. So both Glenn and I both went and had it done.
Yep.
And we're getting our second one in the beginning of June.
Perfect. That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. Thank you.
And we encourage everyone to get whatever vaccine is available to you, whatever way you can get it. It's the best way that we can get past this lockdown, get back to some sense of normalcy that we're all anxious to do. Thank you. Councillor Councillor Ferguson, then Councillor Vanderbeek.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, I got vaccinated 2 weeks today. I think that means I'm the oldest person on council to be in that category. But it was totally seamless, easy to make the reservation, and I was in and out at West 5th in about 25 minutes, including the 15-minute wait I had to have. So my 2 weeks are up, so I think I'm fully cleared now, although I still wear a mask and do everything I'm supposed to. Yesterday, we had a scary experience in a family business where we had an employee test positive. And it wasn't an easy experience to go to report it to public health because the phone lines were so jammed up, it kept hanging up on me. And but once we got through, incredible service from public health and coaching us through the process and what we needed to do and didn't need to do. Immediately started contact tracing, and so we got all the coaching and advice we need and the training, and we're back to normal this morning. So I just wanted to publicly recognize Connie and of course Paul Johnson and the rest of the people of public health, because it's a scary experience when it happens to one of your own company. It really knocked us back on our heels, but the outcome was good, and I want to thank them. So that's all I have today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And you know what? Appreciation for our public health officials and the folks that are working in the vaccination centers and clinics and healthcare. I mean, they're moving heaven and earth to get people into the facility and get them out of the facility and hopefully take a lot of the anxiety away. So that was my experience as well. I'm hearing that from others consistently and from you as well. So that's much appreciated. And if you can share that appreciation with them directly, that would be, I think, a lift for them in terms of the work that they're doing. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Nothing today, sir. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this coming, or next week, sorry, Wednesday, February the 21st, Flamborough Horticultural Society is having their annual general meeting. It will be virtual and it starts at 7 p.m. So please go to their website. Last evening, we had 100 Women Who Care Flamborough at our virtual meeting, and it's just been established about a little more than a year now. And we are already surpassed the 100 membership mark, which is fantastic. We last night we heard from 3 charities and Healthy Youth Network, which is just a fabulous charity that that assists our youth in Waterdown and Flamborough, with any mental health issues, personal crisis, choosing what kind of courses they want to go to high school, was selected, and will be receiving funding of and each woman gives the $100, and it goes towards the charity that is selected. So there will be some healthy funding going to Healthy Youth Network to be able to use in developing their student and youth portal. And my e-news went out 2 days ago, I believe, and it goes out to about 4,000 residents throughout Flamborough, and as I understand, some throughout Hamilton as well. And to have sign up for it or find out more information, please go to judypartridge.ca, and that's Judy with an I. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing from me today.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Pauls. Not seeing her at the moment. Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a commemoration I want to announce, and then I have a question of staff on a couple of news stories today involving Coots Paradise. So I will do the commemoration first, Mr. Mayor, And then I'll look to your guidance on my questions to staff, because under member statements, it now says non-debatable. So I'll leave that to your judgment and discretion, Mr. Mayor, when I get to that item, please.
Well, I'm assuming it's going to be non-debatable, but you're going to be raising an issue that you would like some clarity on, so that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the commemoration, Mr. Mayor, on April 24th will be the 106th anniversary of the commemoration of the first genocide of the 20th century, the Armenian genocide, as recognized by many governments across the world, and very proud of the fact that our Canadian government as well recognized the Armenian genocide of 1915. This will be the 106th year. Normally, we would on April 24th be with the many Armenians of the Hamilton and district area at the Armenian Community Center. I know, Mr. Mayor, yourself and Councillor Pearson have been consistent, regular attendees at that commemoration service. Unfortunately, because of COVID the last 2 years, unfortunately, it will all be done virtually and or through announcements like mine. When the Ottoman Turkish government in 1915 deported 1.5 million Armenians to their death in the genocide of the Armenian nation. It was very sad, it was very tragic, it was criminal. And Mr. Mayor, we all remember less than 20 years later, the infamous comment from Adolf Hitler when he was embarking upon what he was doing to the Jews with the incarceration and the concentration camps. He was infamously quoted as saying, well, after all, who remembers what happened to the Armenians? Mr. Mayor, I want to say that I'm proud of the Canadian government that they've not only recognized the Armenian genocide, but they have apologized to many groups in our country, including through the Truth and Reconciliation report by Murray Sinclair to the Indigenous nation in Canada. Unfortunately, with the Turkish government, to this day, 106 years later, no formal or official apology has been, unfortunately and sadly, forthcoming. So, Mr. Mayor, to the diaspora of 7 million Armenians, approximately, that live around the world, and to the approximate 3 million that still live in Armenia, nation proper, I just want to say, never forgotten, and long live the two institutions in our city, one in Councillor Marula's ward, the St. Mary's Apostolic Orthodox Church on Mayhurst Avenue, and to the Armenian Community Center at 191 Barton Street East in Stony Creek in Councillor Pearson's ward. Thanks all. In the past years I've been on council, every year I've made this announcement that councils of past and current have been supported and have recognized exactly this tragedy that occurred 106 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And on the second item?
So, Mr. Mayor, thank you. On the second item, Councillor Collins alerted me early this morning as I was still rubbing my eyes to awaken, get ready for the council meeting today. He alerted me to a couple of news stories, and I want to read one, and the questions will be to either General Manager Dan McKinnon, if he's around. He may be tied up with other matters, and or Senior Director Andrew Grice or City Manager Smith. I'll read just the one story, Mr. Mayor, that captures kind of the other stories that have appeared in today's paper. Headline in CBC Hamilton, Royal Botanical Gardens says considerable sewage still spilling into Cootes Paradise. And Mr. Mayor, just quickly, I'm just going to read some excerpts here. Andrew Grice, Director of Hamilton Water, said the city was looking into concerns about the water raised late last week and earlier on Tuesday, but said this isn't a spill. It's darker, older algae that has floated to the surface due to low lake levels and weather conditions. However, Mr. Mayor, but the head, here we go again. I thought we were hopefully every stakeholder group and the city of Hamilton, we all are independent, of course, but I thought that there's a collaboration moving forward. But here we go again. But the head of the natural areas at the Royal Botanical Gardens disagrees with Andrew Grice's comments that the algae isn't concerning. Thijs Thijmeyer said in an email statement that algae starts with the spill at Chinook and is also driven by other outflows and overflows and bypasses that occur when stormwater overwhelms the city's combined system. He says, quote, as there are no other plants currently growing due to the past spills, all the nutrients are feeding more substantial algae growth that would otherwise naturally occur. So, Mr. Mayor, I won't read the entire media story or the others. I just want to know for the public record, I need reassurances, at least from my constituents. Senior Director Grice has said, I'm paraphrasing, basically nothing to worry about. It's bloom algae. I'm hearing from a stakeholder, and Environment Hamilton happened to disagree as well, saying, no, it's otherwise. Through you, Mr. Mayor, please, to whoever can provide the assurances I need. Thank you.
Dan McKinnon is here. General Manager McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Dan McKinnon, General Manager of Public Works, and I'll invite Andrew to follow me up if he feels like he's got anything to add here. And so I appreciate the anxiety that a news story like this can raise with all of us, and so appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. I am going to reference specifically the article that I read most recently and some of the comments that are attributed to Tice. He did agree that this is algae, and so I know that with the samples that Andrew's team has taken in the kind of preliminary review that our laboratory has had on this, they do agree that it's algae, and they actually feel that it's old algae, likely from last year. One of the other quotes that is attributed to Tice is that the exceptionally low water conditions this year are also making it easier for algae to grow. So this is not sewage, this is algae. And so at the risk of complicating my answer here, algae thrives in an environment where it's been given nutrients, and sometimes that nutrients can come from sewage. But what we have certainly learned over the last number of years through the remedial action plan is the vast amount of nutrients that it's making its way to the harbor now is coming from the watershed. And so that comes in the form of sediment and phosphorus and these other forms of nutrients that can feed algae. And so over the last many years, as a result of the remedial action plan and the upgrades that we've done to Woodward, the CSO tanks that we've built across the system, and other endeavors that we've taken to try to reduce the amount of nutrients or sewage leaving our combined sewer system, we've really lowered that contribution to the harbor. And now we see that the vast majority of nutrients that is coming to feed this type of algae is actually coming from the watershed, and that can be in the form of fertilizers and other materials that can come down during stormwater flows. Having said that, we do know we still have a lot of work to do with our combined sewer system. We know that our combined sewer overflow tanks will overflow when we have major wet weather events. And I believe Andrew's gone back to have a look at our data. And I think we have had one overflow at the main King tank in the month of March. We also have a limited number of uncontrolled overflows where in those wet weather events, we will see small overflows. So there will continue to be contributions of nutrients into the watershed from our combined sewer system as a result of its design, and as a result of the fact that to change this is going to take a generation or two to get ahead of all these things to try to eliminate all of those overflows. And we have got plans currently underway and new plans being developed to deal with all of that. So I don't want to be splitting hairs here, but I do want to focus on this idea of nutrients because it can be coming from a variety of areas. And the material that was in Cootes Paradise, I think we all agree, was algae, either very small portion of new algae or old algae, and it wasn't sewage. So while there is a connection there, and it just looks awful to the community and to the public, there's a much larger story behind that. And so maybe if I could, I'll invite Andrew to see if there's anything he wants to add to that.
Okay, Mr. Grice.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that was a very good summary from Dan. I don't have a whole lot to add. Dan did talk about some of our uncontrolled points. So there was a motion from Councillor Clark earlier in this term of council, and you will receive a report come to the Public Works Committee meeting in May. It is an update on our uncontrolled points and what it might take to get some visibility and control over some of those facilities as well. But Dan is right. We do have great visibility and control over Main King CSO tank, Royal CSO tank, but there do remain a number of points in our system where we just lack that visibility. So it's a long journey and we are looking to make improvements. The only other thing I would say is, sometimes things can be taken a little bit of context. So I was not trying to indicate that it is not a concern for us. Algae in the harbor is certainly not something we want to see on our water course. I think the line of questioning was, does that lead you to believe there was a spill? And no, the presence of algae does not lead me to believe that we had a malfunction or a major sewage spill. But from a more
holistic perspective, yes, certainly we'd like to see our water courses as clean as possible without that algae present. So I would agree with both Linda and Tice that that presence is not something that we welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Mr. Mayor, thank you to General Manager McKinnon. His statements was excellent and just fully further supported by Senior Director Grice. General Manager McKinnon, thank you for concluding this was algae and not a sewage spill. That's what my constituents and my community need to be reassured of in light of sometimes a headline that can suggest otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me that. Thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate the clarity from Mr. McKinnon and Andrew Grice. Much appreciated. Councillor Collins. Okay, we'll just wait and maybe come back if possible. Councillor Nan.
I'm all good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'd first like to start off by saying that with a warm heart, I'd like to say Ramadan Kareem to all of our Muslim neighbors who are entering this holy month of reflection, generosity, and kindness. And in the spirit of Jardi Gala, I would also like to wish my fellow Sikh neighbors Basaki de Lak Lak Vadaiyan. As our neighbors of both faith engage in virtual observations, I'm aware that many visible Sikhs and Muslims still continue to face bias here and globally. It's my hope that your special time is safe, filled with goodness as you observe virtually. On April 20th, the Ward 3 office will be hosting the city staff a cycling and transportation planning meeting to get input on the Victoria Avenue cycle track. To register, please email at ward3@hamilton.ca. The free backyard tree program, which I think we allocated the 200 trees we had initially brought forward within a week and a half. We've been able to extend it with an additional 100 trees. Registration is open until Friday. We have about 50 trees left. And finally, Beautiful Alleyways kicks off for a week starting on April 17th, of course, restricted to households engaging in the cleanup efforts together. For more information, please follow Beautiful Alleyways on Facebook, and information is also available on my social media. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Farr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. In the coming weeks, look for the Central Neighborhood road sidewalk replacement, refurbishment, right from everything below surface updated appropriately to above surface, and even a number of calming efforts as a result of citizen engagement over the years. Park, Shafe, Mulberry, Colburn, others, parts of Bay will be closed at points during this massive rehabilitation, parts of James at Mulberry as well, and I'll be sure to update accordingly, not only the neighborhood, but the ward. There's also several intersections where we're going to see some road closures to do the hookups for these massive intensification projects. And I'm just working with a member of my staff right now on a 10 years of intensification map that actually will show just how many floors of intensification we've put in Ward 2. It is unprecedented. It's like never before. And I think that one visual will tell a very important story. Also, if you're out safely strolling the harbor in the coming weeks, be on the lookout for the renderings of what all that construction will bring. Actually, Mr. Mayor, you sort of inspired this a couple of years ago when you brought forward the motion to make every concerted effort to put visuals on construction hoarding that tells folks what's going to be on the other side once all that noise and dust and everything else is complete. And so from the Haida on down to the Royal Hammy, and maybe even parts beyond the Royal Hamilton Yacht Club, we're going to have massive markers that show exactly what that is going to be, because certainly you cannot avoid the massive amounts of investments that are going on right now, and infrastructure is in place in a lot of these spots, but for the most part, it just looks like a massive construction site. A lot of people know what's coming, but there's over 1 million visitors even during COVID times to our West Harbor and Waterfront Trust, and we thought it would be appropriate to sort of mark off what it is eventually, and in short order, actually, a lot of it you're going to start to really come into form in the fall. Finally, rest in peace to legendary North Ender Edith Morris. Sad news this week. She, with our office and in the neighborhood with her neighbors, was probably, well, she was known for a lot of things, but well known for her care and comfort that she brought to the feral cat population in the North End. that's a legendary group of felines too. Has been for some time, but she's provided in the past the food, the shelter for cats, matching them up with shelter, and well known for that, but is described as, quote, a legend and a monarch of the North End, end quote. And so the Morris family will be honored by our office and their friends and family with a bench, a commemorative bench at Bayfront. Well, it'll be at Pier 4 Park on the harbor. So another marker that is worth taking a look at in the near future. Rest in peace to Edith Morris, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the update. Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the Councillor Jackson raising the Shadok issue. He and I had communicated prior to council, and thank you for his questions and taking the lead in initiating that conversation. I guess my only remark on it is regrettably, with a crisis, I suppose, comes an opportunity, and that is our obligation to understand that the health of our urban waterways, as Mr. McKinnon and Mr. Grice have spoken to so well, is a responsibility that extends far beyond Shadok. It extends to our watershed. And I applaud the efforts of Hamilton Water working in partnership with our community agencies in trying to bring that model of governance, surveillance, and activity and action to protecting that watershed and our urban waterways. The residential development that is taking place far beyond Cootes Paradise and industrial activity is affecting our natural resources. And it requires not just our observation, it will ultimately require our action, and it will require our investment. And I think the municipality has a role to play in our policies that should be coming forward soon in ways in which to incentivize, encourage, and also penalize those who inadvertently or not are compromising the health and well-being of our natural environment. So I just wanted to put that out there. I appreciate Mr. Grice and Mr. McKinnon speaking to the matter. So those are my comments. Thank you very much, and thank you again to Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. And for me, just to follow on those comments, it does highlight the issue of taking a watershed approach to remediation of some of these water courses, because the impacts are well beyond the urban area. Actually runs itself into the agricultural area and the phosphates and fertilizers that are used to grow the great food that we all want to enjoy, but ends up in our water courses, which is an excellent nutrient for the growth and development of algae. So there's a multitude of things that we need to continue to work on, and I think the watershed approach, I think, is the best way to get at the entire system, as opposed to just isolated areas. Not that we don't have to deal with the impacts of events that occur, but clearly there's a systems approach that I think is wise to use when we deal with these issues. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge the passing of Neil Everson, a longtime director of our Economic Development Department, a very much loved and respected individual that passed away too soon at just 63 years of age, and certainly, as you may well know, struggled with dementia and Alzheimer's in his later years, but was an excellent leader in terms of economic development in our community. And if you look at many of the positive things that are happening in economic development right now, we can turn to the employment district or the industrial, lands that have been identified, the commercial industrial lands that have been identified throughout the city, even the waterfront areas and some of the opportunities that land there. A lot of them were started by under his leadership in economic development. And so I just want to say to the family, pass along our condolences to them, and certainly he's a great loss to our city when he retired, and certainly even a greater loss now that he's passed away. So we certainly pass on our condolences and gratitude for the great service he provided in our community that has got us to where we are today in many respects. So we thank him for that. Beyond that, I have no further comments. I'm going to turn to Councillor Pauls for a motion to receive the communications updates from March the 26th to April the 8th, 2021. That's the new feature of our agenda. So Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. That the council communication updates from March 26, 2021 to April 8, 2021 be received.
Thank you. And again, not to be debatable items, but if you want to refer them somewhere, you could. But receiving them is the appropriate motion. So all in favor?
Mr. Mayor, if we could just get a seconder, please.
Thank you. Councillor Pauls, a seconder.
Councillor Johnson. Thank you, Brent.
All right, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Thumbs up from Councillor Partridge. That thumb looks very ominous when it's right in front of the screen, I must tell you. Sorry?
And that carries 15-0.
Thank you. And we have the closed session of March the 31st. Unless there's any comments or questions, we can move those. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Moved by Pearson, second by Partridge. Thank you. All in favor? And we're going to, once we get the confirmation that that's approved, go to the bylaws. And Councillor Pauls, you're ready with the motion. I'm sure you are.
We're just waiting on Councillor Partridge's vote to come in for the last one, Mr. Mayor. She has her thumb up.
Yep. I'll
that
focus
carries
on the manual vote. Thank you. Councillor Pauls, the confirming bylaws.
I'm ready. That the April 14th, 2021 bills be passed and that the corporate seal be affixed thereto and signed by the mayor and the city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Jackson, will you second that?
Yes.
You would?
Mr. Mayor, I will second the affixated. Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to stop right there. Thank you. All or any opposed? And thank you, Councillor Pauls, to have confirmed the bylaws, and Councillor Partridge, thumbs up.
That carries 15-0.
Thank you. And we need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Ferguson. All in favor. One last electronic vote. And have a great rest of day. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Mayor, you were clairvoyant today. Well done.
Well, I thought it was off the rails for a while. Well, we got back on track, so that was good. Thank you. Well done. Talk to you soon.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Be well.